Hi again everyone, my name is Becky and I am here to teach you design for free. This video is going to be a tutorial of how to create a repeating pattern using software like Adobe Illustrator. So if you've ever had the urge to create a tropical pattern, stay tuned. There are two elements to any pattern. The first is a color palette, the second is the shapes you'll use. In terms of color palettes, color choice is a whole field of design. It's a whole can of worms, which I actually designed a product for during my first year in design school. Today I'm going to show you some ways to take the burden of that decision making out of your hands, offloading that burden onto nature. In this video, I invite you along as I create three very different patterns from photos that I take out in the field. But first, we have to go out into the field, so let's go. Always wear sun protection, always wear sunscreen. So I'm on a college campus right now. I can't really go out into real nature because I live in a big city, but I can go to where there's nice landscaping and natural features. So there is grass and plantings, and I've also got the lake right next to me. Let's see what I can find. Okay, so I'm not going to try and look too hard. I want to prove to you guys that you can make great color palettes from anything, but I did find some nice flowers that I'll go ahead and take some photos of. And then just to prove that you don't even need any flowers, I just went and took some photos of the grass and the water behind me to see what kind of color combinations we can get from that photo. Okay, so I'm home now and I have uploaded my photos onto my laptop. And there are two different ways that you can take the colors from your photos and put them into your Adobe Illustrator design or whatever software you're using. The first option is just using the eyedropper tool and making the palette yourself. The second option is to use an online resource that I found very useful called palettefx.com. Let me show you those options. So I have uploaded the photos to my computer and I've selected one with a nice wide range of color and brought it into Illustrator. The first option for pulling different color combinations out of this is to simply use the eyedropper tool. So I'm going to create a little color palette on the side and use the eyedropper to fill it in. Let's get one of these browns. You can always use the I key on your keyboard to get to the eyedropper. So there we have it. There's a color palette. I don't love it, so let's switch it up. I want to change the brown to maybe a darker brown. And maybe this pink to one of the more extreme versions of pink that was on this flower. And this dark green color to one of the more, yeah. It's always good to have a mixture of different values, meaning lightness. This is a very light color, this is a very dark color, and then we have some kind of medium, highly saturated colors in the middle. And now let's try it with the grass. Let's go for this monochromatic one. And then one of the brightest on the page. Let's see here. Maybe that. A lighter color. That's a nice color. Okay, so let's also go for a dark color. And there you have it. This is surprisingly similar to the other palette we created. I mean, here's the deal. These are decent color palettes. We could make a fun pattern out of these, but there's another way to take the decision even more out of your hands. And that's using a website called palettefx.com. So you can see when you pull it up, they have a placeholder image, but let's go ahead and create our own. And boom, we have a wide array of colors. And what's the next one we want? Sure, why not? This tool gives us a lot of options here. You can see it gives you hex, RGB, and HSV. You'd want to take these values and store them somewhere. Or do what I do and take a screenshot and then put it right into Illustrator. Boom, we've got the color palette. Let's do it out of the grass now. And look at that. That's a nice color palette too, isn't it? We've got an array of dark colors, light colors, highly saturated colors, and desaturated colors. Okay, now that we have our color palettes, let's start building the shapes for the pattern. Again, you've got two options here. Well, really, you've got a million options. But the two options that I most often use are tracing images from Google Image Search or tracing images from the photos themselves. And for these examples, I'm going to show you that even with the photos that I took that aren't great quality photos, that you can pull pretty decent shapes and make pretty great patterns just using whatever you pick from your photo. So let's get started. All right, so first up, pick a flower and start tracing. I just go click, 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 click. I don't worry about curves on the pen tool because I have a trick I will show you that will make it look better. So I check out the flower after I trace it, and I don't like how it looks. So I'm going to trace a different flower that maybe is a little bit more symmetrical. So I go back in, I trace a bit more symmetrical flower that might look better as a silhouette. And okay, I like how it looks. So the next thing is go to Object, Path, Simplify. If you don't know this trick, this is going to change your life. So when you pull up Simplify, the first thing you want to do is click Preview because it's going to show you the changes that will be affected. And ew, that's gross, so let's change it. So first things first, I pull up the curve precision to in the high 90%. Angle threshold, I don't actually know what it means. If you do know, comment below. But basically move these sliders around until you find an effect that you like. And all right, I like this. So I put it on the place and I make some more shapes. This time maybe let's get a leaf. Again, click, click, click. No curves. Pull it over. And let's simplify it. And I actually really like the effect that this had. So I'll change the color and maybe I want to change the shape a little bit. The great thing is you can always take liberties after you trace the item. All right, let's get another flower. Let's find another symmetrical one, and this one looks pretty different, so let's give this one a go. Again, just really quickly trace. I can trace things like this so quickly and then use the Simplify tool. It saves a lot of time, even if you do know the pen tool very well. So pull this over and let's simplify. You get a lot of variability with the Simplify tool. Okay, now we've got some shapes. Let's go ahead and start building the pattern. The other thing I like to do is take the shapes that I trace and reflect them so that they start looking like additional different shapes. So here come the flowers. Let's reflect them. Choose another color for variability. And from here, it's really just about choosing a composition. A composition that's going to include a lot of variability of color, so not a lot of items that are touching each other of the same color, a nice consistent amount of negative space or white space. And what you're going to want to do is center this composition on a perfect square of a background color. Obviously, in this case, I've chosen the hot pink color. And the reason you want to keep this in the middle of this perfect square is because in a little bit, we're going to be taking this square, chopping it in half twice, and then filling in the negative space that we leave around the edges. You'll see what I mean, but in the meantime, you can enjoy me moving things around, trying to find a decent looking composition. By the way, yes, I did add orange to this palette because you know what? I wanted to. You can see I start kind of going for a layered leaf look in some places. Okay, so I'm starting to like this. A few last touches. And we can move into the cutting part of the process. So what you're going to want to do is make copies of your composition. I like to make 3 copies. One is for posterity. The next thing you're going to do is go back to Object, Path, and then split into Grid. You're going to want to pick 2 rows and 2 columns. We're splitting this into 4 tiles. You don't need to add guides. And all of a sudden you've got this orange square that is 4 squares. So take this grid and put it on top of your copied composition. And then you're going to want to pull up Pathfinder and use that tool after selecting all of it. And what do you get? You get a composition split into 4. So ungroup it. You can see you can pull things apart now. But you're going to want to select half of the composition and then just pull it to the other side. And it's very important to make sure that it's perfectly lined up here. Make sure you don't leave any pieces behind. This part is tedious. And then you're just going to want to go and do the same thing over again, splitting it in half at the top and pulling that all the way down. Doing your mandatory pixel pushing. Again, if this doesn't remain a perfect square, you will have trouble tiling it in the future. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. Let's just make sure, let's double check that it's a square. And if it's off by even just a little bit, you can check to make sure that there weren't any extra little pieces on the side, which I think is true here. Let's see. There we go. That's it. Again, this is pretty tedious when there's things on the edges like this. But it's not the hardest thing to fix. Okay, let's double check the dimensions and transform. And if there's anything slightly off, we can unlink it and manually make it into a perfect square. All right, so then we got our perfect square. And make sure that you save your work frequently. Okay, what's up next? Well, of course, we're going to make another copy of our work here to make sure that we don't lose our progress. And I like to group this new grid to make sure that when I'm moving new shapes around on it, I don't get new shapes confused with what already exists, because I don't want to move what already exists. So then I start pulling on shapes from before and again work on a composition. Again, you want to keep the new shapes away from the edges because this is what's going to look weird when you start to tile this pattern. All right, and if I'm satisfied with this, guess what? You're done. As long as this is a perfect square and you don't have anything touching the edges, you'll be able to tile this and get a wonderful tessellating or repeating pattern. I'm going to save my work, and you can guess what I'm going to do. I'm just going to copy and paste this a bunch of times next to each other and see the full effect. All right, what do you think? I don't know that I'd wear this, but it is a full aesthetic taken from one photograph that I didn't really try very hard to get. Let's move on to the next pattern because we've got 3 other examples to try. I probably won't try all of them. Okay, so let's try the grass photo next. I'm going to do what I said I would and trace some of the plants in the photo. I have no idea how this is going to turn out. So we're experimenting together. Okay, so that looks kind of nice. I'll add in a stalk myself from my little imagination. Pathfinder it together. And let's just make a whole bunch of copies. Okay, so this is looking kind of cool. So I need to make sure that these stalks won't come off the page. So I'll make some even shorter stalks. Okay, so this is looking cool. It's looking like a Thanksgiving decoration. Let's go through and change the colors to our color palette. And hey, that looks kind of nice. It looks like some sort of like masculine print. So I'll do the same thing. I will make a copy of the pattern and then another copy, turn one of them into a grid through Object, Path, Split into Grid, and then I will place it onto the other copy and split it into 4. Ungroup it, make some space, and here we go. Let's lasso 1/2 of the grids. All right, looking good. Okay, so we'll split it in half, try and get it as perfect as possible to the square that it was before, and do it again vertical. Let's check the numbers. Looks like they're not quite perfect, so let's edit them and force them to be perfect. All right, make a copy of our progress, group it all together, and then start adding more pattern to the center of the composition. This is really an experiment. I really don't know how this is going to turn out. I do like the color palette though. Again, this looks like maybe a wallpaper pattern in a baby boy's room in a beach house. All right, how'd it turn out? What do you think? It's not bad. And let's do one more. So this one will have a nice light colored background for our square. I'll use the same shapes from the first pattern, but I will put them in the new color palette and see what different effect this leads to. I also want to see what happens when you put much larger elements into the pattern. And then lots of composition choices. All right, that looks kind of cool. Split it into a grid. Go half and half. Save progress. Add more to the center. Okay, save progress and let's see how it looks. All right, it's interesting how even using the same shapes, by adjusting how much negative space I leave in and also what the foreground-background relationship is between the light and the dark colors, I get such a completely different effect. So what do you think? Not bad for a throwaway attempt at demonstration, isn't it? I just want you to think about how easy it would be to take your favorite photographs from your collection and turn them into patterns using these specific methods. And that's it. What you end up with is some very specific place-based patterns. You can imagine from these examples how easy it is to create patterns from imaginary shapes or shapes pulled from really great examples from Google image search or a mix of different images. While I was making this video, I had the thought, wouldn't it be great if I took one of the great photos I took during a trip to Seattle, looked up a bunch of the most interesting pine cones and other vegetation that exists around Seattle, and then using the color palette from my photo onto vegetation from Seattle and creating a specific Seattle type pattern, etc. for anywhere in the world. If you've watched my tutorial and you know that there's a better way to do something, please comment below and to correct me and teach me. I will pin the comment and make sure that everybody can find your tips. And if you make some patterns that you'd like to share, find me on Instagram and share them with me. I really want to see what you make. My Instagram is @BeckyMarshallDesign. You can also imagine putting these patterns on the background of a website or printing it on fabric. Those are the two best examples I can think of. If you can think of more, comment below and I will pin that comment too. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you learned something, feel free to hit the like button. You're also invited to hit subscribe and the bell notification icon if you'd like to watch more videos from me. I make a lot of different videos where I create a lot of different things and do experiments and tests, all under the theme of teaching design for free. Keep prototyping and I'll see you next time.